Hello and welcome to the show here on this Monday morning at OurGame. Myself and Michael Verney, as ever, previewing what was yet again a pretty dramatic weekend of action. We're brought to you by OurGaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame and you'll get 15% off. Unbelievable range of jerseys there, harkening back to the good old days. And you know what? I'm wearing this pretty retro Mayo top here. I've started wearing it socially. I get the odd stink eye from people up here in Dublin when they see me going around it. I nearly tempted to say to him, well, I'm actually from Tip. It just looks class. But how are you, Michael, after that pretty much relentless weekend of GA action?
I'm actually from Tip, but I'm a half dub, and I'm going around wearing a Mayo top.
How could you call me a half dub? I'm Tip all the way.
The weekend was mad. It's funny, Shane. Eamon O'Hara was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and we were previewing the All-Ireland quarterfinals, and he said, and I kind of went over my head at the time, he said Galway and Armagh could be the game of the decade. And I was kind of like, this
decade?
Yeah, he actually said that, the game of the decade. And I was like, that's like way too much. Like, it mightn't even be the game of the best quarter final, let alone the game of the year or the game of the season or the game of the decade. But it probably wasn't too far off. Like, Shane had absolutely everything in terms of big scores, big saves, big melees, big incidents, big sending offs, and the first
penalties,
the first penalty shootout where a team is knocked out of the championship as a result in a knockout game. Sure, it had nearly everything and a serious amount of class on show as well. I was at the Kerry yesterday, covering the Pretty Polly the day after the Derby as part of the Derby meeting, and you just literally, when you're somewhere, you try to be there in body and mind, but it was near impossible to be there in body and mind with what was going on. And it was a weird one because Kerry and Mayo, the game that everybody was looking forward to. Like, you were there in Croker Park. Had you any energy left for the second semi-final?
Oh, I'm sure even Mayo and Kerry themselves are saying, what's the point after that? I know, you are looking forward to another game. Of course you are. But, I was there trying to do the post-match videos I always do after the Armagh-Galway game. And even just trying to gather your thoughts for that, because there was just 1,000,001 different incidents. And then trying to build yourself up for the next game after it. Now, I was hoping that Mayo-Kerry would deliver. But when you saw that, Ryan O'Donoghue wasn't in the 26, I think we all thought the chances of Mayo being able to get the scores on the board in this game, they're a little bit unlikely. But you know what? Kerry were so unimpressive in the first half. You thought, okay, maybe there's actually a chance of something happening here. But I will go into the stats later on. But Mayo, after the break, were tragic. End of Early and Davy Burke were talking about it on the show last night. We'll be playing a clip of that a little bit later on. We'll also hear a little bit of what James Horan had to say. Just for those that are watching on the live chat there, we love getting the chat in all the time. Now, there was a little boo-boo this morning. The system myself and Michael work on, there's a little private chat system, and by mistake, I had forgotten to let Michael in, and he put in a tasty little comment there. So that's what that's about. If anyone,
fair play to you. That's the second time this weekend you've thrown me under the bus.
Hey, look. Actually, speaking of throwing people under the bus, we have a few raffle prizes organised for next Friday's big show down in Birr. And I told someone we had a particularly tasty prize coming, but I'd taken it up the wrong way. But we'll get to that another day. But yes, we should remind you now that we do have that live show coming in Birr. Tickets are on sale locally. You can also private message myself or Michael on Twitter. We'll organise tickets for you, no problem at all. Kieran Kerry, Cyril Farrell, Michael Dignan, Richie Power. We've also added Brian Wheelahan, local legend down in Birr, and John Carroll, former Tipperary hurler. So if that isn't enough to whet your appetite, heading into an All-Ireland semi-final weekend, Clare Kilkenny, Limerick Galway, and also the minor All-Ireland of Hon Tip against lovely Owl Offaly there. Well, what would whet your appetite?
Yeah, I can't wait for Friday night. It should be great. I'll crack. Oh, Shane, I'd nearly let the cat out of the bag here now.
I'd rather not. Yeah, no, go ahead. No, go ahead. I
think we have the king of all raffle prizes. We have. I bought a ticket 3 years ago for the JP McManus Pro-Am. Can't go, unfortunately, because I have to go to a wedding in Crete. One of my best mates get married in Crete. So we have a ticket for the JP McManus Pro-Am for the 4th and the 5th of July up for grabs. Only people in the room have a chance of winning on the night. So this is worth about 300 quid. Tiger Woods, who's not playing the British Open, will be playing the JP McManus Pro-Am. So you have a chance to see the greatest of all time amongst many, many others. It'd be 2 days of absolute golfing and sporting bliss. So make sure you're in the room in Dooley's Hotel on Friday.
Yeah, if you want to win that raffle, we'll be selling tickets on the night. But let's get back to the, we'll also have Orga Retro jerseys. We'll have a little raffle for them as well. So you never know, he might have some of those beautiful Offaly ones. That is it the 1994 Carol's?
Carol's meets absolute dynamite. Yeah, one of the boys is wearing down training the other day. And he says, "Did you use the OurGame promo code?" He says, "By God, I did. 15% off."
Hey, and as your buddy Andrew Sully 180 says, and remember, it's not unusual for those running the raffle to actually win the prize.
I can guarantee you that many strange occurrences will happen in Dooley's on Friday night, but I'd be fairly confident that won't be one of them. But you never know.
Yeah, we'll run through a few of the other comments here. Again, Andrew Sullivan. Well, lads, what do you think of an All-Ireland quarter-final being decided on penalties? In my opinion, it should only go to extra time, the original fixture, and if it's a draw, then it should be let go to a replay. To me now, I'm happy enough with penalties. And I said this to you after the Munster minor hurling final earlier this year, Tipperary and Clare. And I know Tipperary came out on top, but even beforehand, I was like, this match is so memorable. It's gone to extra time. We're going to penalties now. And it's just letting the air out of the balloon if we just say, look, we'll come back and do it again in 2 weeks or next Saturday or whatever in a replay. I think this game, it'll obviously be remembered for the melee for the wrong reasons, but I think we'll always remember this Armagh against Galway game because it went to penalties. I know it's cruel, but you can lose cruelly in a variety of ways. You can get sent off and the whole country gets to see it. You can miss a penalty in regular play, never mind a shootout. You can miss an easy chance from the 21. You can miss frees. People still talk about Cillian O'Connor missing that level and free against Dublin 5 or 6 years ago. It can happen in a variety of ways. Penalties isn't another way. That's life. That's sport. You win some, you lose some.
In Andrew's next comment, he actually said that he had no problem with penalties on the second day, but he didn't like it the first day. It's kind of conflicting. Pádraig Joyce said after penalties have no place in the GA. That's a soccer thing. Listen.
So is diving, and there's loads of that in the GA.
Yeah, unfortunately, some of those things are starting to seep in as well. I'm nearly conflicted about it. It does make the game more memorable. Like, that game will never be forgotten yesterday. It would probably wouldn't have been forgotten anyhow, but the penalties have made sure that it will never be forgotten. I don't agree. I don't like minors having to go to extra time and penalty shootouts when there's not a mad rush on time. I wouldn't be a big fan on that. But if Galway had been beaten yesterday, imagine the uproar. If that's Pádraig Joyce's thoughts on penalties when they win, imagine after forking away the lead that they did and nearly losing the game that they should have won several times over. It would have been madness in the press auditorium after with him. But what a way for them to win it. Just something on the penalties as well. And I didn't actually notice at the time, but one of my mates was on to me just saying, like, he thinks the keepers should be doing an awful lot better from the penalties, because he said the taker is always going to the open side. And I look back at it after, and all 7 penalties went to the open side. So if a right-footed kicker was taking it, he always went to the right side. If a left-footed kicker was taking it, he always went to the left side. They never went back across their own body. And I'm going to have to go back and look at more penalties, GA penalties, and see, do many lads actually go with the right foot, go to the left corner, go back across themselves? But all 7 went to the open side yesterday. And in fairness to Ethan Rafferty in particular, was unlucky with a few of them. He was right beside him. They were just, fairness, the Galway penalties were really, really well taken penalties, and would have been very hard to stop. But I think what my friend was kind of saying was nearly they should be taking the chat. If they're going to go, they should be going to that side, shall we say. But it was just a bit mad that all 7 went in the open side of the taker. Very rare.
Yeah, no, I that's a really good observation from your buddy there. I only ever took a penalty once in a shootout. It was soccer, and I did the same thing. I find it a little bit more, in terms of if you're trying to get accuracy, I think that side foot, to the right for a right footer, I think it's just, you do feel like you have a better chance of it going where you want to. So, but it's interesting.
I would have had you down as a Julian Dix type penalty taker. Am I wrong?
Oh, just let's have it.
Oh, just like blow the goalkeeper back into the net.
Yeah, with a miss kick. I thought he was particularly unlucky with Rob Finnerty's one. By the way, Rob Finnerty, what a footballer. Like such a graceful little player. Very, very reminiscent of Paul Mannion in a lot of ways. You know, when he gets the ball, he sort of bops from left to right and then cuts it and kicks it over from that right side, you know, arcing it in for the left footer. You know, David Clifford would score a lot of his points from the same sort of angle. Just a really good player, scored 4 from play. And that was the most anyone scored from play for Galway outside of Killian McDade, who at midfield, 1-2. And like in extra time, when they were up against it, he scored their last 1-1. You know, and scores are like hen's teeth in extra time normally. So to do that was an incredible display.
What a finish as well for the goal, Shane. How quickly, like, I'd love to know how long the ball was in his hands. It was literally to him and it was in the back of the net. It was so quick. And the point to equalise it as well, a savage score.
What AFL team was he with?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. But it was a brief enough stint. He's been back a while now. And it's funny, it's taken him probably a while to really settle back in. But they have him playing a kind of a real energetic role now. He was wing back even there for a while. He's out around the middle of the field now. He has made some difference the last year to 18 months.
It was Carlton he was with. But it just makes me think when you consider the goal that Conor Glass scored over the weekend also. Which AFL, you know, someone who was with AFL for a while is now, you know, really kind of standing head and shoulders above everyone else, or who's the most successful former AFL player in the GA right now. So you've Ray Kennellan, who comes up with some brilliant displays at times. Obviously, you've got Conor Glass, McDade. There's a few of them around there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is definitely. Like Glass actually played a different type of a game for Derry the other day. It's like they wanted him on the ball in attacking positions an awful lot more, and like he made hay going forward. Don't know if it was something that they looked at the Clare midfield and thought that with his energy and athleticism that he could cause them a bit of damage, but that's definitely the way it worked out anyway. In fairness, the AFL recruits, even Conor Nash only signed a new 2-year contract again the other day, and like Meath must be looking at that and thinking, and then looking at Conor Glass and looking at Killian McDade and thinking, God, we could have a guy here potentially out around the middle of the park that could just totally re-energise, I would say, the apathy even in Meath football at the moment. But they're not going to have him for another while yet, at least. And I know Leinster Rugby wanted him at the time. But yeah, that's going to be a battle of the two AFL men, midfield basically in the All-Ireland semi-final, with an absolutely, like, if you look at, like, we're all talking, it's a great chance to get to a final. Yes, it's a great chance to get to a final. But the Dubs or Kerry didn't exactly blow anyone away at the weekend. It's a great chance to get to a final. It's a great chance to go into a final and potentially win it against the head completely.
Well, either way, whichever of these two teams gets to the All-Ireland final between Galway and Derry, they'll be on the back of, is it 5 wins in a row each, 4 to 5 wins in a row each. Confidence will be very high. They'll have played their couple of games at Croke Park. They won't be fearing anything. You know, like Galway have been in an All-Ireland semi-final. What is it? Is it 4 years ago now? Obviously, this is new ground entirely for all of this Derry panel. But like, I don't feel, Sean Kavanagh said it on the Sunday game, Derry people are fairly confident. When they get to this stage of a competition, they normally feel like they're in the right place. And, you know, the interesting thing is, after they won their Ulster final a month ago, they had so many injuries and players that required resting and I suppose just lads out for different reasons, that in their next training match, it was 8v8. You know, because they don't have this unbelievable pick that you'd nearly assume they would, because, you know, Derry, strong GA county, All-Ireland winners 1993 and all that. But Rory Gallagher's probably had to keep different plates spinning and all that to ensure that he got his panel to this stage of the competition in this condition. And
I wasn't aware of that 8v8. That's mad. That is mad. Yeah, that's gas.
Yeah.
Just shows you the reserves. They're obviously operating on much smaller reserves than you'd say than the other three that are still remaining, but they're absolutely maxing them out.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about this Galway Armagh game. Is there any player in particular that really impressed you? It's, like Rob Finnerty is the obvious. Shane Walsh, he scored 1 point from play. So in a way, you could say James Morgan did a great job, but in other ways, he got away with it too. You know, there was a couple of times when he went kind of above and beyond what you should be doing, really, which is something we probably saw across the board all weekend. But yeah, who else stood out for you? We've obviously mentioned Killian McDade as well.
Rian O'Neill from the Armagh point of view, and just to see the angle behind from the Cusack, and like that was another 20 yards in that free. Such a brilliant kick, nerveless kind of a kick, knowing that their season hung on the line. And you know, the melee that started thereafter, it's just like Armagh were after coming from 6 down, couple of kind of softish kind of goals, you'd have to say. Galway were kind of absolutely shell-shocked. The Armagh boys were kind of getting in the Galway lads' faces a bit. And it looked like it was kind of dampening down, and then all hell broke loose. And scenes that you never want to see on a GA pitch. Like, Shane, we've all been in scenes like where you square up to a lad and ends up 15 or 20 lads in. And so it's a lot of pushing, shoving, the odd bit of boxing, but a lot of the time it's much ado about nothing really. But anything to do with, you know, gouging or interfering with a fella like that, it's such a horrible look. And I know you have it for the image on the show today, because it's one of the takeaway images from the weekend. It's probably on the front of all the papers today. It's been, you know, tweeted everywhere, left, right and centre. It's a bad look for the GA, and I know there's probably a probe and an investigation getting moving already. But that sort of thing just needs to be knocked out on the head, whatever they need to do, whether it's a lengthy ban or whatever. But that kind of thing has no place in the game whatsoever.
Yeah, I once had a player try to gouge me in the eye, and you know, it leaves you feeling pretty angry for a long time.
Oh,
after.
you'd kill a fella. Like you'd like, and in fairness to Sean Kelly, the captain, he was bullying, and you could tell he was bullying, but he was very measured going back at your man. He was very, very measured. And your man pushed him 3 times as well, and he just kept pointing at him. Can I ask you as well, just outside of the melee, like what was going on up in the press box yesterday when David Coldrick and his his refereeing team and his officials are on the pitch? When do you find out what the scenario is? Do you find out the exact same as everybody else that Aidan Nugent and Sean Kelly are after being sent off? I find that baffling, really, that there's not some sort of a information given to be it the national broadcaster who's presenting. It's just we're left in such of an information vacuum, really.
Yeah, so what happened is people were thinking there's obviously going to be red cards coming here, you know, so you're in the press box, and in some ways you've got less information than people at home, because they've got the TV, who obviously have a lot of people who are trying to find out information at that particular time. You're in the press box, you don't have somebody else down at the sideline trying to figure it out or trying to get in contact with the officials or that sort of stuff. So what you're doing is you're there saying, okay, if there's a red card now, does that mean that in extra time that there'll be 15 each, or will they be down to 14 each, or, you know, if they get 2 each sent off, will it be 13 each? And we were there kind of debating. Do you remember a few years ago, was it the Galway-Waterford All-Ireland quarter-final? Was it actually last year when Conor Gleeson got sent off at half-time? And he came back out for the second half and he got the red card then. There was a bit of something went on. So we were talking about that, and then we were like, no, but it's a new game. You know, so all of this conversation is going on. And then you see David Coldrick and etc. out in the middle of the field. You see Sean Kelly there, you see Aidan Nugent there, and you're thinking, okay, so he must have the 2 captains over to talk about all the red cards he's about to give out. I was surprised then that it was just the Armagh joint captain and the Galway captain who were each sent off. Now, I think it seems to be roundly accepted that Sean Kelly is going to be available to play in the semi-final, that this is going to get rescinded. And, you know, I mean, I've looked through the footage a few times, and, you know, do you feel that Aidan Nugent deserves to go? But just to finish out your point, look, we knew no more than the rest of you. We're just trying to figure it out as you go along. And you're there trying to count up the amount of Armagh players on the pitch. Okay, is that 14 or 15 now? I mean, that's what you're actually doing at that stage. But what do you think in terms of Aidan Nugent's red card?
No, thought he was a peacemaker. Looked like a peacemaker the whole way throughout the whole process. In fairness, they highlighted it in the Sunday game last night. They highlighted him and Kelly and followed them around, and both looked totally blameless, I have to say. Both were probably, you'd say, playing a captain's part, probably trying to diffuse it, trying to get their players out of the situation. And in fairness, like Kieran Donaghy was in there at the start, actually trying to diffuse it at the very, very start, not being in any way antagonistic at all. And it's just when the fact that everyone that was in the stand, in the Hogan stand, backroom team members, extended panel members, everybody had to go across the field because, from covering games, double headers, when there's a double header, the two teams that are playing the curtain raiser both get togged out in the Cusack stand side, and Dublin, and Kerry and Mayo get togged out in the Hogan stand side. I think probably after yesterday, they're going to have to look at, Kerry getting togged out in the Cusack, Mayo getting togged out in the Hogan, and vice versa with Galway and Armagh. But everyone just ended up in on top of each other. And I was just even looking, the tunnel is different at the Cusack stand side. There's steps. And I was just thinking, like, someone could end up flying down these steps. Like, it's really dangerous. The one in the Hogan is, I think it's flat, or maybe just going downhill ever so slightly. But the steps, I thought, really dangerous. There's barriers there. So anything could end up in on top, lads could end up in on top of this, thrown to the ground or whatever. But just really, the scenes that we saw at the start, normal enough within GA circles, not saying it's acceptable, but normal enough. And then you see something that's totally out of the ordinary and needs to be quashed out. The thing I was kind of alluding to asking you there is, like, I just think referees need to explain their decisions. And even if it's a matter of giving a 30-second thing to someone, the RT sideline reporter on the day of a game, and just saying, listen, we've done this, this, and this because of this, this, and this. These two players have been sent off. Both teams will be able to play 15 on 15 for extra time because it's a new game, essentially. And explain the whole thing and let everybody know. I just think we're kind of left in a bit of an information vacuum, and you're trying to figure out on the spot. And as you say, there's a lot of things in Croke Park that's very beneficial to be where we are in the press box, to see a lot of things. Then there's other times where you'd like to be in on top of a television because they're maybe finding out things sometimes quicker than we are because it travels slower coming up to where we are. But it was a mad game that really, like, had everything and finished in the most dramatic of circumstances as well.
Yeah, I'd say refs have so much to do. You'd probably need a fourth official, maybe, if you wanted someone liaising with the media to explain decisions. But then also, if you're saying, okay, well, you made this decision, but like the evidence here shows that you got that wrong. Because you're not going to see everything as a referee, and all of a sudden you're being because if I was a referee, right, and I'm sure they're discouraged from doing this, but it's definitely happened over the years, whereby they make a decision, or the ball goes out of play, or the play is stopped for an injury, and it's up on the screen. Now, sometimes, obviously, a lot of the time they don't show it on the big screen at Croker because they don't want people, reacting in the crowds. But I would say they definitely look up now and again just to see what happened there. I know I definitely would do it if I was a referee. Like the red card that Greg McCabe got yesterday, I'm pretty sure at least once it was visible up on the big screen. Now, maybe I'm mixing it up with something, but I feel it was shown on the screen, the way he hit Matthew Tierney. To be honest, I think the referee got that one 100% right. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
He just mistimed it, but, you got to time it right.
Yeah, he mistimed it. I don't think there was any intent. It was really marginally mistimed.
Yeah, but the intent was to cream the man, and he wanted to cream him fairly. But you didn't cream him fairly, you got it wrong. So unfortunately, the booby prize is yours, the red card. It's the way it goes.
To be fair to David Coldrick, I wouldn't have given it in normal time, as in looking at it in normal time. Probably the same maybe as the John Small and Owen McLaughlin incident, even in normal time. Then you look back at it again, it probably was the right call, in fairness, because you just can't have that degree of collision to a head. If you're timing that, has to be absolutely on the money. And if anything, you probably have to err on the side of caution and go lower. So if you're hitting a man down here in the arm/shoulder rather than the higher part of the shoulder, because if he ducks, you're hitting his head and he's in big trouble then. Yeah,
when that Owen McLaughlin Small one happened last year, I thought red card instantly. I'd say this one I wasn't so sure, but and that's the thing, you can't always be sure, which makes it very difficult for the referee. A few more comments are coming in here. Traumspieler, I'm curious to hear about the matchday experience of actual patrons who attended yesterday's games in Croke Park. It must have been incredibly frustrating and, dare I say, stressful with late throw-in. It was actually tough, I think, for supporters on both days, just getting in on time because parking was desperately difficult to get. I think the Derry fans, a lot of them showed up and the game against Clare was already in the books. Some of them were 10, 15 minutes late and, the game was already done at that point. So that was frustrating because the Pride Parade is going on as well at the same time in Dublin city centre. So trying to get into the city or get parking or whatever, absolute nightmare.
Just on that, Shane, as well, the first game threw in at 1:45 and they basically weren't off the pitch until 4:45. essentially they were on the pitch the goods of 3 hours. It was
That's mad.
Madness, like, really, when you think about it.
Bert Giggles Ash Tiger says, our man who repeatedly stuck his finger in Comer's eye needs to get a 1+ year ban from all competitions, or else what are we doing in the GA? What does it say to kids or rival sports if that lad walks? Now, one thing is, I definitely think that there's a ban coming, and it will be rightfully so, but I did see people saying who are his employers and all this kind of stuff in terms of like tagging in employers. That's complete, like, this whole cancel culture thing is disgusting. I remember even a few years ago, and people mightn't like it, but Gary Walsh tweeted after a certain case, the Laois footballer, tweeted after a certain case that he didn't agree with how people were reacting. The verdict went one way, everyone was reacting in the other way, and he was standing up for the verdict. Now, he was a little bit tasty in his approach. And I might have looked at it and said, well, I don't disagree with what you're saying, or I don't agree with what you're saying, I don't like it and all that kind of stuff. But then you had people tagging in his employer, tagging in the county board, tagging in the sponsors of the county board, tagging in the jersey maker. This cancel culture is absolutely disgusting. And a lot of the time it's done by people who say they're up for everyone's freedoms. There's a serious issue with people, and anyone who's looking to just cancel someone entirely, just get away from me. You're a nasty person.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you on that point. Like, we don't know that the extended panel member involved could be the best employee of all time and had an absolute moment of madness on the pitch. I'm not even sure of his disciplinary record, if there's ever been anything like this or any blot to his name. And that is in no way condoning it whatsoever.
No.
But to start throwing things about employers and stuff like that and try to, affect someone's livelihood as a result of something. This is something that happened as part of the game. He shouldn't have been where he was. He most definitely shouldn't have done what he did. But the GA will deal with that, and that'll be that. And they'll deal with it. I'd imagine they'll deal with it fairly severely.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other comments that I'm going to blitz through here. Some really good comments. Keep them coming in. We always love people interacting with the show. Bert Giggles, Ash Tiger again. Derry fans should be ashamed of themselves, booing and jeering every time Clare lost the ball or made a mistake. We're as bad as England soccer fans throughout the game. It was embarrassing. Now, do you know what? I think there's been an awful lot of this sort of stuff in GA at the moment of, shouting, when there's a puck out or a kick out from a goalkeeper, you have the crowd going, you fat, backstirred. Ha ha ha, this sort of crack. And a lot of the time, there's a skinny goalkeeper. It's just engaging in sort of soccer chants. And there's a little bit too much of it in jeering lads when they hit wide. So I agree with that.
I really like as well. The Ulster final was something similar. There was something similar happening there. And it's not something that you like to see. There's just no need for it, really. There's an element, there should be an element of respect for both sets of fans. Plus, and both sets of fans and both sets of players. Plus, you're like drastically increasing the likelihood of a flashpoint outside of a ground or potentially on the pitch as a result of this kind of crack by just antagonizing opposition fans or opposition players.
Yeah, and look, that's not to tar everyone with the one brush. There's an awful lot of brilliant Derry fans out there, and I bumped into a few. I saw them all, having the crack and all that. But there's a few. But what I did straight away was just say across the board, this is getting a little bit tasty. But Bert Giggles, Ash Tiger certainly made his point strongly there. Park Gill says Rian O'Neill had been having a relatively quiet match, made what he did at the end all the more impressive, like what Tony Kelly did. Yeah, absolutely. In that Munster final, the sideline put it over just to take it to extra time. Did you suspect that Rian O'Neill was going to score? Because when I saw him take it, it was outside the 45, plus he was off to the side, which adds probably another 5 to 10 yards to it. And I thought, Jesus, with the pressure involved here, I can't see him knocking it over, and then he clears the crossbar by about 10 yards.
Yeah, no, I honestly didn't fancy it, to be honest. I'll be straight with you. I didn't fancy it. I just thought it was a bit too far out. Probably with the angle, you're probably looking at about 51, 52 meters. Really tough kick, so much pressure on. And he clears the crossbar by about 20 meters and has another 10 or 15 on it. A really, really amazing kick. Just trusting your technique under the most intensive pressure. I think it was in the 80th minute by the time the ball went over the bar. That was like 80 minutes of normal time, another 20 of extra time, a 5-minute row. They went to the dressing room at two different times. Like, they were actually 3 hours on the field. It's mad. Like, it really is mad. And just on a point that one of the viewers made there, like I'd imagine Kerry and Mayo people didn't get back home till all hours last night. You know, the game threw in closer to 5 o'clock. They were probably back guts at midnight, I'd say, by the time you get a few chips into you on the way home somewhere.
Yeah.
So, but listen, Kerry fans will be happy enough, and I'm sure they won't be deterred anyway from coming back up for that tasty semi-final.
If you were to try and sum up that Armagh and Galway game in 2 sentences there, or try to sum it up really quick, how would you sum it up? It's just impossible to.
I'd probably say something like game had everything, finished on penalties.
Yeah.
Something
Do you know
like
what?
that.
Like, I wouldn't have always been a massive believer in this Galway team and where they're going, but you can't help but have a little bit more belief now. Obviously, they're in an All-Ireland semi-final. What has Cian O'Neill brought this year? But, you know, he seems to have obviously brought something, and obviously Pádraig Joyce is bringing plenty too. But one thing that did stand out to me is every player from number 7, who was Kieran Malloy, forward, all scored in the game. And Finian O'Leary came on and scored a point as well. So when every player from 7 forward is scoring, that just shows you've got threats pretty much across the board. So if I was a Galway supporter, I'd be thinking that, you know, there's really something to build on here. I thought Matthew Tierney was quite good. Obviously took that blow to the head. Johnny Heaney with the goal. Actually, I couldn't believe with the goal. So in the first half, I thought that Armagh were able to move the ball really well. They were able to move it forward really well and look like scoring all the time. And a lot of the time, I took a picture of this and threw it up on Twitter. There was times when there was not a single player from either team in the Armagh half of the field, because the entire Armagh team was moving forward, including Ethan Rafferty, who was like the furthest man back, but he was beyond midfield. And so Galway were really struggling to move the ball forward. But in the second half, that kind of flipped. Like Armagh should have been well ahead at half time, but it was 7 points apiece. But in the second half, Galway were the ones moving the ball forward that bit easier. And there was that time when Matthew Tierney got in behind. There was some break of a ball around midfield. Tierney gets in one-on-one for a goal chance. Rafferty obviously tips it onto the crossbar. But the Armagh defence all just decides, okay, back out the field now, we'll try and get on the attack. And leaves Johnny Heaney in there along with Matthew Tierney. And obviously they handball it to the net from there. And I just couldn't believe it. But obviously they steadied down. We had the mayhem towards the end of the game. Do you think actually it's good for Galway to have won the game in that manner? Obviously leave out the scrap and all that, but to go from being 6 points ahead to completely collapsing, to going behind in extra time, to coming back to win on penalties. So like there's a few different things here. So many different panelists have now gotten game time in this game. So they'll all be feeling like, geez, I have a chance now to feature in the All-Ireland semi-finalists, but you know, especially if they played well. But also they've been tested. They've gone all the way to the well. Imagine the feeling, that, a bit like Clare against Wexford last week, imagine the feeling in the dressing room and in training the next couple of weeks now. The bit is going to be between their teeth.
Oh, big time. Like, as you said there, true way, a winning position in normal time. Had to deal with all of the emotions of that. Then were able to pick themselves back up, conceding another goal, obviously in extra time. They were the ones to force penalties, and then they were coolness personified. And can I just say from the penalty takers as well, it was, 15, 14, 13, 11. They're 4 penalty takers. There's no messing around with attacking wing backs. You have 4 lads who are brilliant forwards, all really, really talented forwards. Just put them taking the penalties. They're used to shooting that goal. They should fancy. There was no messing around, and it was great that the 4 of them who you would have said, you know, they're their 4 marquee kind of forwards, and the lads are going to be doing a lot of the scoring. They all stepped up, took a penalty, which was great for them. And I think on a flip of what you said there, it is a worry for Galway that in a lot of their games this year that they've blown big leads in normal time. Like they've nearly lost the winning position against Mayo. They nearly lost the winning position against Roscommon, and they did lose the winning position against Armagh yesterday. But it's kind of forgotten when you get over the line. But what'll have to be worked on is, I don't blame the keeper fully, but some of those goals that they conceded, like, is if you're a Galway supporter, if you're Pádraig Joyce on the line, how the ball was let bounce for one of those goals, I'll never know. Like, basic, when you were in Bursley, when you were knee high to a grasshopper until you were an adult player, a puck out or any sort of a ball, do not let the ball bounce. Always make sure there's someone batting it or palming it or catching it or whatever it is, and how that ball bounced in the square. And it was just a big, massive hop, an absolute mayhem. Gleeson was, I don't know if you'd say he was unlucky, but he had the ball in his possession and gave a dodgy hand pass out, and Connor Turbot read him like a book. He read it. It's like he knew exactly where the ball was coming and just volleyed it into the net. But there's no way. Like, give the ball parallel to the end line if you have to. Make it as safe as possible. But you'd hope that those lessons have been learned for the next day.
Or at least just lie on the ground, lie on the ball. I think that'd be a 21-yard free, wouldn't it? Rather than a penalty.
I don't even think he needed to. But if he was given a hand pass, it should have been off out to the side.
Yeah. To be fair, actually, I know you mentioned the penalty takers for Galway, but the three for Armagh were Stephen Campbell, Rian O'Neill, and Connor Turbot. So it is probably, all lads that you would trust to take. By the way, Kieran McGeeney said afterwards, in terms of, their exit, he goes, it's just the way sport is. It's cruel. Going to replays and stuff is not fair on supporters either. The way things are, coming to Dublin is an expensive thing to do. So I think that is the other side of it too.
Yeah, very philosophical. In fairness, I
think he had a touchy standoff with some BBC commentators afterwards in terms of being asked about his future, and he was asking questions back, and I haven't had a full chance to look at it just yet, but it must be a tough spot sitting up there at the top of the room. I was in for James Horan's one afterwards, and we'll play a little bit of that now, but it must be a tough spot answering questions. Will you be back and all this kind of stuff?
Just on that, from our point of view, somebody has to ask. But it's the most it's like nobody wants to do it really, because it kind of feels like a lack of respect. Like I was over in the GA Museum when Roscommon were beaten by Clare in really dramatic circumstances, and Anthony Cunningham had to be asked, but nobody wanted to do it. Eventually he was asked, all right, and he was pushed by some local journalists, and you could see it was irking him, as it would, because it's just not what you're thinking about. It's what we're thinking about, because we're always looking to throw something forward, but that's just not in the manager's head. From Kieran McGeeney's point of view, this is obviously the furthest. It's the furthest they've got with Armagh, isn't it? This is the furthest they've got with Armagh. Had they been to a quarter final before?
No, they got to that qualifier in 2014 against Donegal. Dramatic game, but didn't get to the quarter final.
Yeah,
so it's the first in a long, long time. I can't remember exact year, but it's a long time.
Clear signs of progress. Very close to getting to an All-Ireland semi-final. If they played Derry, they would have fancied their chance of getting to an All-Ireland final. They obviously retained Division 1 status. So, listen, Daniel Flynn was on the GA social on BBC there not too long ago saying that Kildare were going to go on strike when McGeeney was shown the door by club delegates. So I just think Armagh would be doing everything and anything to hold on to him. It's clear that their graph is on the rise, and they'll definitely want to keep him there.
Yeah, Joe, actually, just one final thing before we move on is that on the full-time, in between full-time and extra time after the melee, the music playing on the Tannoy in Croke Park was Trouble with a capital T. So I think not for the first time recently at Croke Park, someone's having a bit of crack with the music that they're playing.
Either that or it should have been I knew you were trouble when you walked in, because your man walked into the row and the trouble game started then as a result of it. But I feel it's mad. I can't remember the last time I've wanted to talk about a football match as much as this. And I feel like we've talked about it for 40 minutes, and I feel like there's probably more to talk about.
There's more in the tank, but we will have to go on to Kerry against Mayo. And 118 to 13 points was the final score here. And as we kind of already mentioned, just Mayo do not have shooters. And normally when they don't have their shooters, as was the case against Kildare, Lee Keegan or Owen McLaughlin or Oisin Mullen or somebody like that steps up here. But as I look at the match program from yesterday, Lee Keegan didn't score. He had a couple of banana shots that didn't go over. Oisin Mullen didn't score. McLaughlin didn't score. Paddy Durkin didn't score. And the forwards just once again weren't able to bail them out. Yes, Tommy Conroy is out. Yes, Ryan O'Donoghue is out. Cillian O'Connor is not all that long back from a serious enough injury. But surely there's a few more players in the county can actually put the ball over the bar. I know Darren McHale and Darren Cohen were out as well. So they're really kind of digging deep into the panel. But surely, but it looks like there's no attacking plan when they move forward, that they don't know how to break down numbers. And you just wonder, how many more years do Mayo want to keep losing the same way? This felt an awful lot like the All-Ireland final last year.
Yeah, it did. And you kind of, you knew their fate from a fair bit out in the second half, didn't you? And it was real soul destroying dropping balls into the keeper's hand. It's like conceding a point nowadays because it's so hard to get possession back. And it was really kind of soul destroying stuff. I know we were talking about managers and whether they're staying on. From James Horne's point of view, it's his second term. He's another 4 years done. Kerry ended his first term down in Limerick that time in the dramatic All-Ireland semi-final replay. Be interesting to see whether they'll end his second term. They obviously, as you said, they were missing some marquee men. I kind of thought they were hanging in there nicely at stages in the first half, and it looks like potentially Clifford has a knock even and mightn't be up to his usual standards. But Mayo just weren't able to take advantage of having a lot of possession and having a lot of ball in front of the Kerry goal, but they just weren't able to maximise it whatsoever. Can I just ask you, Shane, as well about David Clifford? What was it like? What did it look like from high early on? Looked like he was in bother earlier on. I couldn't believe it watching the game that he was able to play as long as he did and be as influential as he did, because I thought he was in big bother earlier on.
Yeah, I was fully sure he wouldn't last the game because, we all saw what happened when he seemed to stand on the ball, got a bit of an ankle sprain, and Jack O'Connor referred to it as jarring his ankle after the game. Then there was another ball he contested, seemed to go over on it again. Like, that could have blown up like a balloon this morning. And he mightn't be able to train between now and the All-Ireland semi-final against Dublin. And of course, if Kerry overall are to play as they did in this game, like, take out his contribution, which is a goal obviously from play, which not too many others are going to score that. They had, was it one other really good goal opportunity in the first half through Paul Ganey, and I'm sure he'd be very disappointed to miss that. There was another goal chance in the second half for Tom O'Sullivan after a couple of brilliant dummies from Sean O'Shea. And O'Sullivan, he was probably around the 14 and he blasted it over the bar. So they did have 3 goal chances overall. But like Clifford, when he gets that ball, and a beautiful little stutter and delay from Stephen O'Brien to set him away. And I thought it was interesting. Paddy Durcan was marking Clifford at this moment. And when Clifford was out on the wing and handed the ball to Stephen O'Brien, just for a split second, Durcan let him go. Didn't get a bit of contact on, just allowed him through. And I wonder is the fact that I think Durcan, there was talk of a hamstring injury recently. Maybe he wasn't at 100%, but either way, the door was just a little bit, too open for Clifford. He went through. As soon as he took that bounce, I think everyone in the ground was just marking their program to just say go on Clifford. You just knew he was going to finish. It was just like when Tony Kelly runs through, you're like, okay, there's a goal coming here. It was that sort of feeling. But like, Clifford scored the goal. He also scored 2 marks. So obviously he won the marks himself. So it's, in a way, it's as good as a score from play, if you want to be generous with it. Paul Ganey, very good, 3 from play. Sean O'Shea got a couple from play. But there's a lot of other players there in that Kerry forward line, midfield and back line where you'd be like, I'll tell you, you wouldn't necessarily be thinking they're going to blow Dublin away here. I have to say, I think probably half their forwards didn't overly impress me. And yeah, they're down Adrian Spillane, they're down Jack Barry. But sure, who isn't down a few players at the moment? And like that, like half back lines need to be able to drive the team forward as well. Like Mayo's half back line didn't get going the way it normally would, but this Kerry one didn't either. And I'm just not sure that the balance is there. Like Brian Bjuglig is a good player, Tyke Morley's a good player. Obviously, Gavin White can raid forward. But Tom O'Sullivan does obviously come from very deep, and he scored 3, so he is that. But I just don't know if they have enough of that from the back line and midfield. Like David Moran was brilliant yesterday, but will he get the same on the front foot as often against Dublin? I'm just not entirely sure. So that's why I come out of that game the same as I went in, with questions about Kerry.
Yeah, I suppose from a Kerry point of view, at least they won't be running away with themselves anyway, definitely going into the dubs, because they've so much to work on, you definitely have to say. And with Clifford, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Everyone's going to be trying to get little bits of snippets of news over the next 2 weeks to see whether he trained or what he was able to do. I'm sure he'll have that leg up somewhere for a couple of days, or maybe in a protective boot for a while. But
hey, do you think we should camp out in a tree above Fitzgerald Stadium for the next week or two to see if we can get a gawk?
You wouldn't know. There could be. I'm sure there's a couple of dubs in exile down there. You wouldn't know. They might be. I just think that that's such a GA story. Like to try and get any bit of intel that you possibly can. It's amazing how things have changed. I remember being in Nolan Park about 10 days, I think, before the 2011 All Ireland final. Like, and you're able to watch everything in full view, exactly what they were doing. There was no secrets. And even the year before, sure, wasn't there something like 10,000 watching Henry come out to play that training game? And now you're literally looking for any crumb of information that you can get from anybody that may be associated with a panel. But just something I want to say to you, because I know you hated, but this hand pass point is an absolute killer. It's worse it gets. It's worse it gets. And Armagh utilised it a lot yesterday. But when a lad is bearing down on goal and he's one-on-one with the keeper and he hand passes the ball over the bar, it's soul destroying. It really, really is.
Like, they got rid of it from hurling. Why not get rid of it from Gaelic football as well? What is the upside of this? Yeah, it is the smart decision at times. But like, it's called Gaelic football. At one stage, when you receive the ball, let's say you do a turnover, you could get the ball all the way to the other end of the pitch by just hand passing it the whole way and hand pass it over the bar. And obviously you hand pass for a reason. It's the best way to secure possession and retain possession and all that. But because it's called football, you should have to kick it at one stage, at least. Yeah. But anyway, that's just my opinion. And so
I saw Jim McEnany, who plays with Loud, just tweeting, like, he just can't get over how they haven't got rid of it yet. Or will I still be talking about this in 20 years? They got rid of the hand pass goal. They got rid of the hand pass goal in hurling. The hand pass point is gone. They got rid of the hand pass goal in football. You'd imagine it's only a matter of time. I just don't know what it adds to the game, really. I just don't think it adds anything.
Yeah. Okay, let's hear a little bit from James Horan. He was talking about, just basically summing up the game in his own thoughts and then asked about his own future. So we'll play a few minutes of that and we'll come back then.
I think we got 4 from 16 shots in the second half. I think we'd piles of attacks today, with an awful lot of attacks today, and just didn't get the return from possession that we had. I think that's it, and they certainly did. So that was the difference. I think we'd a couple into the goalie's hands at a key time, and I think that knocked us a little bit and gave them strength. And I think that's where they got ahead into a comfortable lead, and they managed it from there.
All came at crucial times, just Kerry.
Yeah, but I still think we were doing well in the first half. The goal was a slack goal to give it away the way David drifted in. I thought defensively we were sound. We worked very hard there, but it was a slack goal from our side. It was well finished, obviously, but slack from ours. But I thought we came back. We came back well. Had a very harsh black card from what I can recall. So we were still in a good position then, though. But yeah.
How long or how difficult was the 1 hour delay?
I don't think it was too bad. I suppose it's difficult that you don't know that it was an hour. We didn't. There was nothing formal. It could be 4:30, it could be 4:45, it could be 5. So that was hard. If it was clear, regardless, I think that'd be easier to handle. But look, it's the same for both teams. You try to manage it as well as you can. It's not a scenario you're in very often, but I think it was fine.
Just on the black card, James, it was harsh there. Did you get indicated what it was for? Or?
No, not really sure what it was for. There was obviously contact, so if you thought the contact was taking the man out or whatever, but I'm not fully sure what it was for.
You set up very well in the contained Kerry. That's obviously the score return is the disappointing. Your game plan wasn't working.
Yeah, I thought we did a lot of stuff right, and as I said, our turnovers were very impressive. We and a lot of the scores Kerry got in the first half, and look, I know it's always the case, but a lot of the scores Kerry got in the first half were probably from mistakes we made where we were in a good attacking position. So look, that's the big area where we need to make improvements.
Easy to say nowadays, but like some Ryan being missing and also Tommy as well. I mean, they're two that we start forwards.
Yeah, look, we're missing, and look, we do. With the injury that he has, it's hard to know. We thought he'd be back. We thought, as I said to you the last couple of times I was here, we thought he'd be back, but it's a hard one to know exactly a date with it. It's not like a hamstring or whatever. So didn't get back. Yeah, but look, Tommy's a big loss, and Michael Plunkett and Michael Plunkett was probably our best player this year throughout the league, and so he was a huge loss. So we were unfortunate with some of our injuries for sure. But look, you saw Dublin yesterday, you see Kerry today, we're missing a few as well. So it's the way it goes.
Is there an iron to take some time out and looking forward to refocus into next year, or what's the...
There's no really looking forward now. We just had a chat in there. Everyone just it's never time to make rash promises or decisions or statements after the end of the season like that. So everyone will take a bit of time.
And does that include yourself, James? It's been a tough year to manage
Mayo. Yeah. It's as I said, everyone will take time to reflect for sure. Yeah, it's been a tough year. As I was just saying out there, that if you're designing a year, it'll be the absolute inverse of what we had. From no pitches to play leagues into no training pitches to no trainings, which cancelled trainings, to the amount of injuries. It was one of those Rigel-Taggle type of seasons. But for the players' credit, they kept going and kept battling. We were down a lot of games, and it'd be very easy for just for you to call it a night, but didn't kept going. So huge credit to the lads who were involved.
Was there that feeling that you were always battling, Michael? It wasn't running for you.
Yeah, we're always battling, but that's part of it. Yeah, we didn't get the breaks for sure, but that's not a road worth any good for anyone going down that. But yeah, and today we're in that game for a long time. Ran out of juice maybe in the end, but still thought we were in the good shout there. But look, it's ended disappointing for us.
It's not the first time that you're even here missed an awful lot of chances, and it wasn't really bad shot selection in a lot of cases. They were in position. What do you put it up down to?
There can be various reasons. We're probably missing our three highest scorers today. That certainly makes a difference. And Tommy, Ryan, and Darren McHale is our highest return scorer. So that definitely makes a start. But your point's fair. We had a lot into the goalie's hands against Kildare and a lot today. So look, some of that's technique, some of it's the speed you're taking the shot at, all that kind of stuff. So look, it's definitely an area that the guys are looking at.
So that was James Horan after match. Very tough to answer all those questions there. Not a beautiful spot to be in, but the point about their accuracy is definitely one that's well made, because over the course of the game, I added up the amount of opportunities they had and the scores they returned. So obviously 13 points overall, really not a great return. And during the second half, there was a run where they scored just 3 points from 15 attempts, which is pretty scandalous, and it allowed Kerry to score 7 points in a row, which effectively ended the game. But they scored 13 out of 33 attempts. Compare that to Kerry's 19 out of 28. That gives you a much better chance to win a game. And then I even look at what Armagh and Galway did in normal time, and that was 16 of 25 versus 18 of 24. You need to be scoring 2/3 of your chances to give yourself a real chance. Whereas, what Mayo did there is closer to 40%, give or take. Someone will correct me if I'm a bit out, but not far off that.
Yeah, what I found most interesting was about, I know McHale Park has been redeveloped and they were putting down a new pitch, but it sounds like they had absolute hell getting training pitches for spring and even for winter training and stuff like that as well, which is just not something you associate with counties anymore. Clubs have it regular enough, it's a regular thing. We don't train on our pitch in Brennan's Park till about March usually most years, just because it needs time. Any pitch needs time. We go to the all-weather pitch in St. Brendan's Community School, but for a county to be struggling and ducking and diving and trying to get in here and there, far from ideal. And I think you mentioned somewhere else as well that they had to call off a couple of training sessions as well, due to the amount of injuries, and I think there was a bug going around the panel or something that I read somewhere as well. But it definitely wasn't the most ideal season. But did any part of you think the same as me, where I just thought, yeah, everything's going wrong for Mayo, and they still somehow managed to pull a rabbit out of the hat and get a result? Part of me did think that, and part of me thought that even at stages watching that match yesterday. But no, they shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, just in terms of attacking coaching, I just really think they're lacking. They're missing a big trick there somewhere. Obviously, Kerry look at it and think defensively we're lacking something. So Jack O'Connor has brought in Paddy Talley. So even if ultimately they come up short, you can see that they've targeted that area. And I just wonder, like, Kieran MacDonald is in there, of course, but like, he was a player who'd probably in a lot of ways played off the cuff, played with his natural genius, but who's in there trying to structure their attack and play and just, try to figure out how to break down blanket defenses, to work the easy scoring opportunities. They talked the last day about how they don't even ever set up these palmed goals. I mean, they're horrible to look at, but pretty much every All-Ireland final that they've lost to Dublin, and I can think of a couple off the top of my head. I remember Dennis Bastick setting up one for Bernard Brogan back in 2013. I can think of Dean Rock scoring one early in 2020. I can think last year Cathal McShane scoring a palmed goal. And yet Mayo never seemed to have the IQ to go and do that themselves. And I just don't understand it, that how they can be on the road for this long, getting this late in the competition, going all the way back to 2011, when they went on that run of knocking out the All-Ireland champions 3 or 4 years in a row, how they've never developed this. How, where Dean Rock has been scoring the same point on the loop around a player who hand passes the ball to him, screens his man, and then he hits it over from more or less a stationary position from the left side of the goal. How have Mayo never worked this into their game? Because they have the player, they have the quality. They surely have enough shooters in the county to make this happen. And still they go out with this idea of, Mayo are at their best with chaos. To me, that's absolute nonsense. Yes, chaos when you're breaking out from the back and you go at 100 miles an hour. But when you get a certain part up the field, you need to have some sort of clue of how to finish this off. Or else you're just leaving in the lap of the gods. And ultimately, they keep coming up short. Well, maybe that's why.
Yeah, they do make life difficult on themselves, you have to say. And as you say there, a lot of the same mistakes keep repeating themselves over and over again. Once you're bitten by something like that, like the palm goal, you'd imagine you're really, going gung-ho to defend against that. Once Dean Rock does 3 or 4 of those loopy points in the 17 All-Ireland final, you'd imagine you're going, okay, we're going to nail this. This isn't going to happen again. We're going to be ready for it. And it just doesn't look like that. And for all their endeavour and all their heart and all their guts and the ability to keep coming back, it is worrying and disappointing from a Mayo point of view that the same mistakes are being made over and over again. And I'd imagine it's somewhat soul destroying for a lot of the Mayo diehards.
Yeah, like Jack O'Connor afterwards, he made a fair comment. He said, the bottom line here is these Kerry players have been yearning to get a cut at the Dubs from as far back as 3 years ago, this being the All-Ireland final that went to a replay, and they obviously lost, Peter Keane being the manager. He said they lost an All-Ireland out there that they would have felt that they could have won. We certainly won't be lacking motivation, but neither will Dublin. Dublin will want to show that they're back as good as ever, the team that won the 6 in a row. They had a blip last year, and they look to have rediscovered the hunger and the drive that got them to the 6 in a row. Now, let's move on to Dublin while we're in the middle of that. No, number one, I mean, hunger is a great sauce and all that kind of stuff, but does that necessarily mean that it's going to get Kerry over the line? They've only won one All-Ireland since 2014 because generally they seem to be lacking something. So number one, are they lacking something? And do Dublin have what it takes now? Like, do you think Dublin have fully recovered from let's say, the blip last year that he's called it? I don't think Dublin are the same team just yet. Obviously, Con wasn't playing, James McCarthy wasn't playing. But to me, neither of these teams are as good as they were in 2019.
Hunger is a great sauce. Something my father always shouts after doing about 5 hours work, when you'd eat bread off the floor. Everything tastes great after a bit of hard work. It's funny to what Jack O'Connor said there is actually quite rare for a manager to say nowadays.
As rare as hen's teeth.
You're after getting in one of your isms, I suppose.
One of my mistakes.
Whoever's at the show on Friday night, I reckon they do Stapleton and Verney bingo. And every time you say, what we'll have to take heed of that, or in the heat of the hunt, they have to take a good slug out of a pint. And every time I say, oh God, I don't know what I say. I'm sure there's several things that I say.
Well, you say topsy-turvy anyway. And you all say, listen, I'm not being smart now.
Yeah, so they'd be fairly well tozzled by the end of the night if they do St. and Verney bingo, I can tell you that.
Hey, not to make too fine a point of it. That's another one of yours.
There you go. Yeah, but what Jack O'Connor said is quite rare. Like, that would be in his head, and all the Kerry players would be thinking that there. Just on that.
Yeah, good comment from Andrew Sullivan. That's another one of yours.
Just it's rare for a manager to actually say that they have a point to prove. And it's funny because Brian Fenton said it earlier on the year that Dublin have a chip on their shoulder. And that was such an un-Dublin-like thing to say. He said it after the Wexford game. We have a point to prove. So you kind of have two teams going in with a massive point to prove. Neither lighten it up, though, you'd have to say. And your second question was, are Dublin back to themselves? You wouldn't think so. They're obviously missing Khan the other day. Barely created a goal chance. Missing James McCarthy, who's the heartbeat of their that kind of middle sector and the one they always look to when they're in trouble. So I think Dessie Farrell said after that they're both touch and go for the semi-final. With Clifford touch and go, and with those two guys touch and go, they're probably three of the biggest players within the 30 that are likely to start. So whether they're able to play or not is huge. Do I think Dublin are back to themselves? They're not back to the levels of 2019, I'll put it to you that way. They might be similar to the same levels as 2020 when Kerry were beaten by Cork and they won a relatively handy All-Ireland final against an inexperienced Mayo team. And I said it to you before, I think Kerry are going to have to be 3 or 4 better than Dublin to beat them by 1, if that makes sense. Because I do think there is a bit of psychological damage there from 2019 and the many other years that they played them, 2017 and even going back as far potentially as 2013 as well. And you were mentioning about David Moran. Like, David Moran was brilliant yesterday, but the Dubs will target him athletically. They will, and they have done that several times when they played them recently. So the game will not be played on Kerry's terms, and Dublin will try and dictate affairs. So, but it's just great that we don't need that game to save the championship. The championship was saved somewhat yesterday, and now this is a bonus almost, and it should be a belter of a semi-final. And the other game, while you mightn't look forward to it as much, it's an intriguing semi-final with a golden opportunity for Derry and Galway.
Dublin and Kerry could be quite different to 3 years ago, because remember, Dublin were holding the ball an awful lot and moving it from side to side, really patient. They don't quite play that game. They do it at times, but they're not quite the same team in terms of their attacking approach. So I'm really interested to see how that game goes. But a reason you could say Dublin aren't the same is they're throwing hurlers out there onto the field now at this stage. But obviously this is in reference to Owen O'Donnell. So he's a supreme athlete, so you can totally see why Dessie Farrell would be looking to get him involved. He came in, he was in the half-back line. He plays in the forward line for Whitehall, Colm Kills. I think he went to town in a recent league game against Temple Oak, Sing Street. So, and I had kind of automatically assumed he'd be used as a back if he came into the Gaelic football team. But when I heard after the call-up that he played full forward with Whitehall, I just assumed, okay, maybe he'll be a forward option here. And even more so when you see the struggles that the inside forward line had for Dublin in this game. I mean, Dean Rock did score 8 frees, but he only added a mark, and that was late on when, the game was in the books. Paddy Small and Cormac Costello got a point each, both really good forwards. But in a game where you're winning by more than double scores, you'd expect your inside forwards to be doing a little bit more. Niall Scully didn't score. Kieran Kilkenny came up with 3, and Brian Howard was quite deep, so I don't necessarily think you'd be expecting him to score all that much. But he came in and wing back, and I suppose I was always thinking maybe they'll be priming him for David Clifford later in the championship. But obviously Clifford is somewhat injured, as we've mentioned a few times. And then O'Donnell, I think it'll take him a few games to get used to this level, because there was one high ball he went up and sort of swatted at, and I was thinking, right, that's somebody in looking to make an impact, and it mightn't just happen yet. So I would be very surprised if he came into the reckoning as a starter in the All-Ireland semi-final. But I suppose it's just the fact that it's so unusual to see someone mid-season come in and get an opportunity this quickly that we're even talking about him. Other than that, it's sort of a cameo. Like, there's other lads who came on and had similar cameos, but because he's the Dublin hurling captain coming in for the footballers, you can't help but talk about it.
Yeah, and it's the fact that they had, their handful of subs to make, and he was one of them. So he's obviously
ahead of Davy Byrne. He came on ahead of Davy Byrne. I thought that was very surprising.
There you go. Obviously, Davy Byrne is only just coming back from that kind of knee injury that he had, that people were thinking could be, ending his inter-county season. But that, that's a fair statement. I only saw bits of this game and I was watching the highlights back last night. But the one thing I wanted to know, once Conn and McCarthy were out, I'm just thinking, okay, did O'Donnell feature? And he's obviously close enough. He's obviously impressive enough. And while he's known as kind of a powerful kind of full forward in particular, for Whitehall, they play a kind of pretty defensive and leave him and Costello up top a lot of the time. And he's a big focal point. But I don't know if Dublin need that type of player at the moment. They're kind of short of options, you'd nearly say, in defence. Like, Owen Merchant is probably struggling to get through games, full games at the moment. He's probably carrying some sort of a knock. Davy Byrne is only coming back. They're short of options there, so they've obviously looked at him athletically there, and the fact that he plays as a defender in hurling, he knows how he has that miserableness, shall we say, that you need to be a defender. Now, I disagree with you. I don't think there's not for a month of Sundays is he been prime for David Clifford, or is there a possibility of that happening? As much as you'd like to see those two kind of duking it out just to see how it goes, but if he's put into the reckoning the next day, you're saying he needs a couple of games, and I agree with you. It's only natural you need a couple of games, but you don't have a couple of games. You're throwing right into the White Heat Championship against your most bitter rivals in a game that will potentially define Desi Farrell's reign. Because if they beat Kerry, they'll think they will come in the All-Ireland again. If they don't, they haven't won All-Ireland in 2 years, haven't been going for 7 2 years before that. So it's a huge game with everything on the line, and I'm sure they'll be doing whatever they can possible to make sure Conor McCarthy are able to feature even in the 26, even if it's not starting.
Just a reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame and you get 15% off. There's a brilliant array of jerseys there. Or even this jacket if you wanted, maybe that Galway jersey as well. Galway heading to an All-Ireland semi-final and already are one in the hurling, which is coming up this weekend. A reminder, we also have our live show, first ever live audience show coming up at Dooley's Hotel in Bird this Friday. Private message myself or Michael if you want to organise a ticket. They're also on sale locally in Birr. Where are they on sale locally in Birr?
Yeah, they're on sale in Dooley's Hotel. They're on sale in Loughnane, Centra and Horns Daybreak. And if you want to go and have a good chinwag with Johnny Pilkington the week of the minor final, he's a selector with the minors. They're on sale up there as well. Pilkington Shop and Pub as well. So you get your ear chawed off you for 10 or 15 minutes, but it'd be worth it for the 15 quid. And as you said as well, some great raffle prizes, including an Orga Retro jersey, and they'll be there to purchase on the night as well, I believe. So yeah, it should be a great night. Really looking forward to it, and it's good that you have a bit of security in John Carroll to look after you coming into enemy territory.
I actually think it's going to be unbelievable crack. So make sure you don't miss out on that. First ever live OurGame show. Plenty of people have already got their tickets sorted. Make sure you do too. Do you know what halftime of this game? And I mentioned earlier playing Trouble with a capital T before extra time over the Tannoy in Croke Park. When Dublin were only 10 points to 7 at halftime, you were thinking game on here. And the person who was doing the music put on that Rag and Bone Man song, I'm only human after all. That's how I was thinking, yeah, whoever is doing this is on form. But I just think that Cork are, of course, down players in terms of players have left the last couple of years. They're trying to rebuild their team and all that kind of stuff. And basically, it doesn't feel like there's a huge amount of support behind them. Keith Ricken, obviously, health issues. It was his first season. He had to leave John Cleary's after taking up the mantle. But they just, on the field, just IQ-wise, just so often they do things that make me want to smash my head off a wall. They did so many things well in the first half. They were forcing Dublin onto their left foot, and if it was their weaker foot, they were forcing right-footed players onto their weaker foot. They were tracking players that they felt needed to be tracked. They allowed other players who they felt weren't scoring threats. They allowed them to carry the ball all the way deep. So I think they were doing a lot of things right. But then at times, they just give away silly fouls. I remember Johnny Cooper was running through at one stage. He was probably about 30 yards out. And I just thought, let him keep carrying it. He doesn't necessarily want to shoot here. He can score, but it's rare enough he does it. And I'm sure, if you're a defender who rarely shooting, you would be second guessing yourself when you're doing that, especially with Brian Hurley running behind him. And he just tugged him back for no reason. And then Dean Rock just knocks it over the bar. And just when they were I found myself frustrated at Cork throughout this game and just thinking they don't really know what they're trying to do here. They're hitting silly shots. They're just during the first number of minutes, Brian Hurley had a rash attempt. Stephen Sherlock had a miss kick from the 21. Then he did a banana shot from about 45 yards out. Then Cathal O'Mahony had one from the 45 wide. Matthew Taylor, he was running in towards the 21, just himself and Johnny Cooper. And you're thinking, this young man up against the player with a lot of years on the clock. Johnny Cooper's really good, by the way. I'm not having a pop at him at all. But you would have thought the younger man had said, you know what, I'm going to test out his legs as he's backpedaling towards goal. Instead, balloons a ball a mile wide. So it meant that of the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shots that Cork had, 5 of them were wides, and most of them were very frustrating. And that's just a pattern that continued on. And throughout the second half, like they had 11 scoring opportunities in the second half, scored 3 of them. They just didn't seem to have a plan with the ball either. Now, would you say at the flip side, yeah, they're playing they're operating in Division 2 and they're in the lower reaches of it a lot of the time? Or would you say, this is championship excuses, we're not here for excuses?
Yeah, even the way John Cleary was talking after, just about like that we're not up. Kerry did something similar to us in the Munster semi-final, and there's probably fairly obvious comparisons, I'd say, between the two of those games. Even scoreboard wise, was it 21-10, and I think it could be 24-13 maybe when they played, or something like that when they played Kerry. But very glaring similarities. Cork are a fair bit off that, and I think they're aware of it. They need to get at least Sean Meehan was back on the bench the other day and back involved in the mix. They need to be able to keep Sean Powter fit for a sustained period of time, because he's huge for them, massive player for them. But yeah, like I don't particularly enjoy watching Cork. There are certain teams you enjoy, like you enjoy watching Galway at times, you enjoy watching Mayo even just for the intrigue of it all. But like, if the general supporter is not, maybe that enthused by Cork football, then I can't imagine what Cork supporters are like. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. They are operating in the lower tiers. They nearly got relegated from Division 2 this year. Nearly ended up back in Division 3. So at least they're there. They need to be more competitive in Division 2. It's like, you don't really like saying it, but it does look like it's 3 to 4 years, that type of a thing, before they get the consistency maybe that they've been lacking in recent years. Yeah, they beat Kerry in that 2020 game, that famous game at Mara Keane's goal, and then they just don't show up in the Munster final, or blown away by Tip. You just don't.
Get nothing easy against Tip.
Well, no, you won't now, in fairness. But it just you wouldn't be 100% sure what you're going to get, what you were going to get off them on a given day. At least now they've been, generally consistent. I think getting to the last 8 was an accomplishment for them this year, and you could see the way they celebrated staying up in Division 2 when they beat Offaly with that point in O'Connor Park. I thought it was kind of noticeable or noteworthy, the way they celebrated after beating Louth even as well. Like, that's where they are at the moment, and it's going to take a bit of time. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, I just feel that they should have higher aspirations than that. They do have a good quality of footballer. Like, a few of them are probably a couple of years from getting to the level required. But I think the other thing is, when I was thinking about the whole thing of operating in Division 2, and then when you come in against the Division 1 team, it's going to be tough. And yes, I get it that Dublin will also be operating in Division 2 next year. But if year after year after year, you have Mayo, Kerry, Dublin, and so on operating in Division 1, and always playing at that much higher intensity for, let's say, the first 3 months of the season, plus these teams obviously stay in the championship more often than not, another month or two more than the teams that are playing in Division 2, and especially 3 and 4. Are you not just kind of guaranteeing that for year after year after year, there's going to be this gap between the top tiers and the intensity they play at compared with the rest of them, which again goes back to my thought that let's scrap the league and let's start out with, for example, 4 groups of 8, which are mixed with different teams. Obviously, you're going to end up with mismatches most weeks, but you should have enough good matches over the course of every round of fixtures. But it means that, like, Cork will be playing a certain amount of Division 1 teams, every month. They'll be playing at least 1 or 2 games against teams that are at the top level. They'll play teams that are a little further down. Their results will be up and down. But that would be the same then for other teams, like, let's say, Roscommon or Galway or Derry, other teams that are in Division 2. They'll get that sort of regular exposure against the Division 1, and you won't have, like, Dublin constantly being fine-tuned to the top level because they're playing Kerry, Mayo, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And I'm talking, that's the case across the board. You're just kind of rigging the game to ensure that Division 1 teams are for, like, if these intercounty teams are together for 8 months of a year, they're probably playing the top tier teams for half of that, whereas the rest of the teams just aren't getting that exposure. So it just kind of rigs the game to some degree.
Just on that, I take your point, and like, this would be what you're talking about with the hurling championships. Like, the Joe McDonough is great, but if you're playing at that standard, for 3 to 4 years, and you're playing those teams, like, is that not what you're going to be like trained for, if you know what I mean. You're not, you're not training for a Kilkenny. You're not training for a Limerick. You're exposed to those teams. Right? That's just going to be your level. That's why I'd say like it's very hard to go from tier to tier, particularly in hurling. You find it very hard to go from Rackard to Ring or from Ring to MacDonagh. It's such a big gap, and you're accustomed to playing against a certain type of team. Probably something similar with the football as well. Your exposure against these teams, it needs to be. I suppose the exposure you're getting against top tier teams needs to be consistent across the board for particularly Division 1 and Division 2 teams. Otherwise, you're just getting into all these bad habits, and you're kind of playing to the level that you're playing against. So it is kind of a tricky one. Just on Cork as well. Like, you have to remember, Cork have should have a lot of underage talent coming through soon. They won the minor in 2019. They won the under 20 in 2019 as well. It's not as if there aren't raw materials there to work from, but you would be a bit worried when you see, was it that Billy Hennessy even that was in with the Cork hurlers at one stage, when you see these sort of lads that were involved and then maybe dropping off the squad. That is a bit of a worry, but there's clearly plenty of talent there. I know an Offaly, we do have an All-Ireland under 20 winning team. So there's loads of optimism in Offaly about what could happen over the next 5 to 6 years. So Cork have a minor and under 20 winning team. So you'd imagine the talent is there. It's just a matter of, there's a bit of apathy in Cork football, something similar to what there is in Meath football at the moment. Two real kind of fallen giants. It looks like it's going to take a lot of time for both of them to get back up to the top again.
You think Dublin, like, can you just put down their lack of a goal threat to just not having Con and that
you
alone?
Can't, Shane. You can't. It can't just be to one man. Does that mean the whole plan has just been built around him, or it's a poor state of affairs if that is the case?
But is it just the state of affairs? Because if you look at the team, and I know he wasn't the only one missing, but during the league they got relegated without having him there, and they didn't look like scoring goals at times. Remember, we did the stats looking at how they had dropped off. Now they seem to have, they probably look like scoring more goals since he's gotten back involved. So does it just mean that if he doesn't play in the All-Ireland semi-final and Clifford can play, that all of a sudden Kerry are massive favourites?
Yeah, because Kerry don't seem to be really conceding goals at the moment either as well.
No.
So if Con isn't playing, listen, I just hope for the sake of the game, I hope O'Callaghan's fit, I hope McCarthy's fit, I hope Clifford is A-OK, good to go, and the best 15 take on the best 15, and they just go at it hammer and tongs, like those classic games. The 2019 draw was as good a game as I've seen in a long time. Probably yesterday was as close as has come to that, drama-wise and everything. And obviously, the game in 2017 was a belter too, the game in 2013. So hopefully we get that, and hopefully we have all the marquee men on the pitch at the time. But from a Dublin point of view, it would definitely be a massive worry, attacking wise, if Con can't feature. And yourself, if he's ready to play, he won't be on the bench. He'll be in full forward probably, and that'll be it. So we'll have to. You might have to do a bit of. Investigating over the next couple of weeks, even though it's so hard. Your best friend could be the captain of the All-Ireland winning team, and it's literally Johnny Tightlips. He is telling you nothing, and tell him to go suckle them.
Derry beat Clare 5-13 to 2-8. This one was just never in doubt from early on. Benny Heron put one into the back of the net. Then Conor Glass did a couple of minutes later. It was 2-1 after 13 minutes. Clare made a fist of it. They obviously got goals themselves through Pierce Lillis and Owen Cleary, but each time Derry responded with a goal themselves at the other end. I mean, there's a lot of positives from a Derry point of view. Shane McGuigan was sensational. 1-7 from play, and he added a free in on top of it. I thought Paul Cassidy did well, got himself 1-1. Glass, obviously, as I've mentioned. Chrissy McKay keeps up his form. Brendan Rodgers, Conor McCluskey, excellent player. Garrett McKinless bursting up from the back. Pretty much everyone played well for them, except maybe the goalkeeper. Again, the two goals that went in, I think he sort of fell backwards when he should have been diving at Pierce Lillis for the first goal. Got caught in no man's land and sort of fell awkwardly for the second one. Now, he did an awful lot right, but, if we're going to mention Conor Gleeson and, maybe not covering himself in glory in the Galway goal, you'd have to say the same for Derry too, wouldn't you?
Yeah, 100%, yeah. And probably not there's probably been some question marks throughout the year on Clark. So it's one thing, but just when you're saying it there, when you say everybody played well for Derry, like, you knew after 5 minutes that they were totally dictating terms, like totally. Whatever chance Clare had of causing an upset, needed to ruffle some feathers early on, but Derry just controlled the tempo, controlled the game. You know, as I said, they played a couple of league finals in Croke Park in recent years, but no big championship game. And from a Derry point of view, you know, as you say, a lot of their supporters mightn't have made the start of it, but the game was half over by the time they got in. And that must have been hugely satisfying from a Derry point of view, that they dealt with the occasion of it all, and even the pressure and the build-up of hype even after the Ulster final, that they dealt with that so well. And it shows already that anything, you know, I think Shane McGuigan said in his interview, after any narrative of them being a defensive team, yeah, they're defensively solid, but they want to put up big scores. And it was just literally a case of every time Clare hadn't scored much earlier on, they got it back to, was it 2-6 to 1-3, and I think Derry went up and got a goal in the next play. And some really, really smart finishing as well.
For some emphatic finishing.
Yeah, really. Like, for one of the goals there, I think it was for the third goal, it got caught in the kind of stanchion at the back. It was right up into the top corner, the top left-hand corner, but just must be really pleasing from a Derry point of view. And they go into the All-Ireland semi-final now against a Galway team that blew them out of water in that league game earlier on this year, that cost them promotion to Division 1. So they're well warned about what is coming down the line. From a Clare point of view, I think it's important we always, you know, give them kudos for all the progress that they've made, and they've made massive progress. They'll be really disappointed that they didn't produce anything really noteworthy Saturday. It was a contest there for about 30 seconds, and then Derry rifled in a goal, and it was no longer a contest. And from Colin Collins' point of view, I saw Derek Lynch tweeting after that, you know, that he left his management team outside and had, you know, long kind of chat with his players. If it is the end of his Clare reign, it's been a sensational reign. But people calling for change for the sake of change within Clare football, I'd tread fairly carefully on that one. I think if it's possible for them to keep him, they should definitely keep him. Lads, the work that he's done, lads like him are invaluable around the county. Just have the betterment of Clare football at heart and nothing else. But they will be really disappointed. They couldn't get Keelan Sexton on the ball. They couldn't get any of their marquee men on the ball. And I know Donegal Boyle did a piece with David Tubridy in Saturday's Independent. That's probably his last game as well, the highest score in the history of the league. So there's potential for a bit of an end of an era in Clare, but it'll be interesting to see what happens there over the coming weeks.
Yeah, they only scored 1 out of their first 9 chances, and maybe if Podge Collins, when he went through and he just kicked the ball on the floor, if that had to go in, maybe that kind of gives them a bit more of a chance. That would have been 2-2 to a goal, but even so, it just felt like it was done. If you go through the players that scored from in the game, Jamie Malone, he had a few pops at goal. He scored a point. Owen Cleary scored, and Owen Cleary was scoreless from play against against Roscommon. So obviously that was huge for him to step up and get 1-3 here, especially in a game when you're beaten soundly. Pierce Lillis scored a goal, but outside of that, nobody else scored from play. So it just tells you how shy they were up for. Like 3 players for Derry got 1-1 from play, and those lads who scored in other ways too. But a first All Ireland final since 2004 for Derry, and it does feel like the sky's the limit here for both teams on this side of the draw. As we've already said, sky's the limit here. On the other side of the draw, Dublin and Kerry, they're going to knock 7 shades of SH1T out of each other. And All Ireland is not beyond the realms of possibility for either of the teams on this side.
Both operating from Division 2 as well. Massive opportunity, Shane. This is like, sometimes you talk about, I'm not sure if we're at the stage of development for this. All that stuff goes out the window. This is a glorious opportunity for both. And I'm sure the management teams will be really, hammering that home over the next while. Galway won't be doing too much this week, I'd imagine. Derry had probably a much easier passage. So Galway are really, really road tested in the last couple of games. They've had obviously a real tight game against Mayo, a comeback against Roscommon that they fended off, and this absolute bruiser. And as you said, they've gone deep in their squad. So they will fancy their chances that if they can really take Derry down the stretch and stretch their squad, that Galway might have a little bit more. But yeah, 2 fascinating semi-finals, you'd have to say.
Yeah, Led Zeppelin says here, Zed Leplin, I should say. The standard of referees in North Tip is a joke. Mention that if you're brave enough, because everyone knows it and is a big topic this week. In the North Tip Championship this weekend, Killadangan beat Killarwan after extra time, and Tumivara beat Burrisley. Any club news? We'll be getting into that more and more in the coming weeks, Brendan Torres. And let's just do a quick power rankings for Gaelic football. We haven't done it for a while. There are only 4 teams left. This was the top 4 we had it earlier in the year. This is a good while ago at this stage. But 2 of those 4 teams are gone. Tyrone are no longer number 1. So this was the very start of the year. You had to give them the respect of being the number 1 team as All-Ireland champions. But for me, Dublin are number 1.
There was cloud silence there. Sorry. I'd probably still have Kerry number 1.
Based on what?
Based on I think they'll win the semi-final, and I think Dublin potentially without O'Callaghan and McCarthy are not nearly as formidable. Yes, Dublin are playing a lot better, we'd say, than they played at different stages during last year's championship. They're still not lighting it up. They're probably just even a shade below 2020 form. There's very little to split the 2 of these. I think Kerry will win the All-Ireland, and I think Kerry will beat Dublin next time out. Part of that is based on gut as well as anything else. I don't think they're exactly lighting it up. I do think their defence is an awful lot tighter. I think that will help. They're much more solid back there. They don't seem to be coughing up the couple of goals that they were a few years ago. Even they're not coughing up nearly as many points as they would have been years ago as well. Dublin, I don't think they're at the same level as they were 2018-19. I think it's a 50-50 game, though, been honest.
Yeah, but if you were going to say who are the best players on the field, you'd obviously be talking about David Clifford, you'd be talking about Conor O'Callaghan. After that, who would you be saying are the best players on the field? I'd say you'd be looking at Brian Fenton, Kieran Kilkenny,
James McCarthy.
James, assuming James McCarthy is fit. Would any other Kerry player break into that top 4 or 5 there? I mean, Sean O'Shea, I should say, wouldn't be too far from it. But I'm not really sure that in terms of the top 5 players, I think it'd be mostly Dublin players. And for me, when I look at a pretty close game, I just ask who has the most match winners. And that's why I would be leaning towards Dublin. Again, assuming that both teams have, Con and Clifford.
Fair point. Who would you say has the better squad?
I would say, yeah, you could probably be going more towards Kerry there, but I still don't think they have unbelievable match winners on the bench. I know Killian Spillane can turn a game. Who knows? He might start the semi-final, but yeah, Dublin definitely don't have the depth they used to have. That's definitely a fair point.
I tell you, going down through their squad the other day, and it's no disrespect to anybody that's on the squad. It's just a lot of rookie players, being honest with you. And even some guys who have been around the block under various managers. Definitely think Kerry have. I definitely think Kerry have a lot of depth. You're bringing in players that can make an impact. Maybe they're not the impact of a Kevin McMenamin or a Bernard Brogan or a Michael Darragh Macaulay, maybe that Dublin had when they were in their pomp, but they still have the better bench. Listen, I'm not going to fall out with you over this, because I do think it's
good.
I do think it's a kind of it's a pretty marginal call. I think if you asked 100 people, there'd probably be a 60-40 split in Dublin's favour, I'd say. So I think Kerry will win the All-Ireland, and I think it's partly to do with the fact that I think they have improved a bit, and I think Dublin have regressed a bit.
What about then? So we're going Dublin, Kerry, even though one of them will get knocked out, but I still think that's the order we'd have them in. Are you going Derry, Galway, or Galway, Derry?
This is a difficult one as well, isn't it? It's set up to be 2 brilliant semi-finals when you really cannot confidently call. If you had £100, you couldn't confidently call the 2 semi-finals and think you're going to make money out of it.
And Galway have proven me wrong to some degree, getting this far and doing it in the manner they did it, and that is just going to do an awful lot for belief. Whereas Derry, they got the draw they needed, I suppose, after the way things went and winning the Ulster final first in 24 years and all that kind of stuff. They got the quarterfinal they needed, one that they could negotiate. They played quite well. Some people would say maybe they're sitting ducks now coming into the quarterfinal, but yeah, I think both teams are in a good old spot. And A. Sully 180 says Kerry are league champions, don't forget, but they also were the last 2 seasons and didn't cash it in. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the Galway Derry kind of scenario is really interesting. I do agree with you. I'd probably just be edging Galway just because I think so many things went wrong for them at different stages, so many mistakes, blunders even, and they were still able to overcome all that and still had the cool heads to slot those penalties at the end. I'd imagine it would just, like they hadn't, when was the last time they won in Croke Park as well?
They won one a few years ago, a Super 8s game against Kerry. Was that 2018? But other than that, I think you have to go back to 2001.
Okay. They beat Kerry in Croke Park in a Super 8s game.
Yeah.
I thought that was a draw now. But,
remember, no, it was a draw between Monaghan and Kerry, I think, that late Clifford goal. And then they lost to Galway, as far as I know.
Really? Jeez, I wouldn't have thought. You're going to have to check it there because I don't think Galway beat Kerry in Croke Park. But I could stand to be corrected. But they'd been beaten.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
Did you? Jesus, right.
First win over them in 53 years in the championship.
I have no recollection of that game whatsoever. But I just would give Galway the slight edge just based on the fact that they did a tougher quarter final. They had to go they probably have a better squad than Derry. And when you're talking about marquee men, like picking the top 5 players between Galway and Derry is fairly tasty. Shane Walsh, Damien Comer, Rob Finnerty,
Shane McGuigan,
Clancy, Shane McGuigan, Connor Glass, you know what I mean? Christy McCaig, Brendan Rogers.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And it's very, very tight call there. Probably just be going for Galway. I think it'll be a Galway Kerry final. You think it'll be probably a Galway Dublin final?
Yeah, I kind of love to see a Kerry Derry final. There's just something about that. I think the colour clash would be good. Maybe a Dublin Derry final as well. But yeah, Galway, it's hard not to believe in them after the way they won that game, even though they collapsed, but they came back and they collapsed again and they came back and then they won on penalties.
From a Galway point of view as well, Shane, they're playing a team in the semi-final that weren't necessarily heralded at the start of the year, but they're being heralded now. It's not as if they're going in overwhelming favourites. They're not. This is a 50-50 game. There's not that type of pressure or expectation on them now.
Yeah, okay, so just to completely clarify once more, there's our top 4: Dublin, Kerry, Galway and Derry. No doubt if Kerry win, Michael will be trying to distance himself from this list, but he has just co-signed on it, so don't let him do that. We were going to do...
Jane, before the Offaly Hurling Championship is on the weekend. I see Brendan Torres asking about any club news. We were beaten, unfortunately. Kilcormac beat us a point, 17 points to 16 on Friday night in absolutely atrocious conditions. Hard to really analyse the game. Conditions were brutal. Probably just the difference was Kyle Kiley's accuracy, I'd say, from frees from all angles and all distances. The other results: Belmont beat Sir Kieran by a point. I think it was 113 to 15. Shinrone and Ballinamere drew 215 to 21. And the other result, Kinnity beat Claudia Gales 115 to 12. So Rhinus and Coolary, last year's county finalists, had a bye this week. The way they're working it this year is 2 groups of 5, and it's not crisscross or anything like that. You play the teams that are in your group. Top 2, or what is it? Top in each group go through to semi-finals. 2 and 3 in each group play in a quarter final. So, and I believe there was Kildare Hurling Championship over the weekend. Naas had a comprehensive win over Leixlip, and as you said, it was a bit of Tipperary action as well. It's good, it's kind of going on simultaneously with the county, and it's good to see. Like, I'm delighted from an Offaly point of view. We're gone out of everything, so just get moving with it. Let's get the club players in. We played our first championship match in June, and we're going to be playing every 2 weeks from here on in. And if we play a bit of football, which we are, a bit of junior B football, we'll be playing a game every week from here on into the end of the championship, which is fantastic.
Yeah, as Sully says here, Wexford action on tomorrow night. Brendan Torres, both Thurles and Lockmore knocked out of Tipperary mid-championship in first round. Yeah, I didn't notice that on Saturday that Upperchurch beat Thurles. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure who beat Lockmore, but we'll definitely be getting into that more and more as the week goes on, or the weeks go by. We were going to do an early All-Stars in hurling, but I don't think we have time today. We'll get to that again very, very soon. Maybe we might just have to wait to do an All-Star team at the end of the year. But look, we'll have lots more coming. Once again, just to remind you, we do have the live show coming on Friday in Birr. Contact myself or Michael privately there on Twitter. I'm at Shane Saint. Michael's at ML Verney. with Kieran Kerry, Richie Power, Michael Dignan, Brian Whelan, Cyril Farrell, John Carroll. Unbelievable show lined up. A reminder that we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame and you'll get 15% off. Anything else to mention before we finish up there and let people go?
No, I'm just wondering, is there anything from Davy or Enda Vardy, or will they be they'll have to tune into that roller coaster themselves? The boys are absolute football fanatics, and the conversation and the back and forth between the two of them is highly entertaining, I have to say. Two highly knowledgeable football men with great insights who are not afraid to, they don't pull punches. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah, actually, I'll play a few minutes to them. I'll skip in a couple of minutes and people can have a watch of that. If they want to see the full show, go to ourgame.ie. Thanks very much, Michael. We'll chat to you soon.
Cheers, Shane.
How you doing? It's a team. Like,
on the group, like, this is obviously finished, and like the goal, at least tonight for Galway, is going to be like he's going to be I don't know, like, he's just, will he start the next year? Like the 3 goals you could point the finger at him.
Yeah.
It was just where, like, I suppose, where do you start? So I suppose Galway, in fairness to them, they started off very well. Armagh got was 3-1 up after the initial 10 minutes, and then Galway came into the game. They swung the ball around. They're patient. They obviously they worked in training because it looked like they knew what they were doing in terms of creating then pockets of space for around the D to get those shots off. They were very accurate. They got Rob Finnerty around the loop, for 2-3 very nice scores. Shane Walsh had a fine game. Comer, all their big players at Fairstone. Paul Conroy, he wasn't the main score getter, but midfielders there to win primary ball, and in fairness to him, again, he did that. So it was all contributed to a Galway, a comfortable Galway win with going into injury time, and then carnage. The whole thing blew up after that. I thought I was disappointed with them, to be honest with you. I thought, even like they go large spells or a couple of minutes just holding the ball around the middle of the field. I don't get that tactic. Is it game management? When they're doing it, they're 2 points down. Like, I really don't get this. Even if they're, Galway were always probing. They're going up the sides along the sideline, going up the 5 and 7 or 10 and 12 channels all the time, and like keeping that D open. At least they're probing, looking to get a shot. But Armagh were just, they're pissing about there for literally a minute and a half. I'd say 3, even in extra time when they're scored down, they're still doing that. It was at Galway. If Galway had lost that game, they'd be absolutely kicking themselves, to be honest with you. And in fairness, they showed serious mental resilience. Going in there at full time after drawing that game, they would have been kicking themselves, and to come out after that, and they kicked on. I think I'm getting confused now. Was it Killian McDade who got the last score in extra time, or was it a normal time? Yeah, extra time. That was a serious score. And again, even like the goal Armagh got in extra time, they tried to consolidate then, and it was just they were trying to hang on instead of trying to go for the game. As in, even the last kick out there, they could have pressed up in the kick out. If they won that last kick out, they would have won the game. Yeah. But they tried to consolidate, and at Galway were well worth their victory.
It must be killing you, is it?
It is, to be honest. But fair play to them. No, in all seriousness, fair play to them. I was very, very impressed with them. They showed a great in terms of their range of the good running game, good kicking game as well, and they pulled off some very, very nice scores. And themselves and Derry now. It's going to be a 50-50 game for the All-Ireland final. And I don't know. What did you make of it?
I thought they started slow, which was on the scoreboard 3-1 or 4-1 early on. But that was the 4 weeks. You'd imagine that was the 4-week break. You'd imagine Armagh being on the road. I couldn't believe how poor they were in the first 10 minutes at breaking down Armagh's blanket. Right now, it improved drastically. Improved, right? Yeah. But they were playing around the blanket, and incisive runners. And then McDade and Tierney started copping. Right, if we flush through this first line, the space in there, and they kicked 2 scores in the bounce then, and all of a sudden the gaps started moving. They started to move the defense, because when teams play 12, 13, 14 men behind the ball, you ultimately end up, where do all the scores come from in football? In general, 70 or 80% come from the top of the D ish, right? Every team blocks the D. So how are you going to score there against a blanket? You got to move them. You got to take them out of there to exploit the space quickly to get it back in there. Essentially, that's what you have to do. Yeah. So it took Galway 10 or 12, 15 minutes to really get the grips of that. And once they got the grips of that, I felt they were good. I thought Matthew Tierney gave a performance. I thought he was phenomenal. I thought he was absolutely epic. 2 or 3 points in the big left foot. But the breaking ball he won, tapped it forward there for the goal in the second half was body on the line stuff. It was brilliant stuff, you know. I thought Killian McDade, you know, his engine's frightening. Obviously came back from the AFL, so obviously we know that's the first and foremost down there is you need to be a machine. And Jesus, McDade's engine was phenomenal for the whole, was it, I don't know, it was 90, 95 minutes, phenomenal. No, it was probably 100.
To be fair, David, we were kind of saying, and I said like, oh, I'd fancy the Armagh midfielders, they're more athletic to them. But in fairness, Conroy and McDade, I was like McDade today, he kind of came under the radar for me. Yeah, he came under, like I didn't rate him that highly as what he did today. Now he was phenomenal.
Did he kick 1-3? Did he?
He did,
yeah. And like, look, and he was phenomenal. And I always had a little lie in him, to be honest. I thought he was good. I hadn't seen it. Now I've seen it. Now we've all seen it. You know, that kind of way. One thing I'll say about Conroy, very poor for 55, 60 minutes apart, or very average. Now, Paul Conroy, in my opinion, is a very good player. But when the chips were down, he kicked a massive score at the end of normal time. Massive score. Was that the leveler or was to put them up? No, sorry, it's put them ahead. Put them. So what was it? Was it to Conroy picked a massive score anyway at one stage, right? And he really wasn't good. Then he went on and caught a huge mark, right? Then he went on and got a huge turnover. And in the first half of extra time, I thought he was excellent. He really came to the fore when the chips were down. Conroy stood up after having a very average, poor 50, 55 minutes early on. And that's the mark of a top-class player. Let's be honest. We all don't have a great day every day. But he stood up, kicked that big score, huge mark one then. I thought he was just brilliant after on a bad day, to step up. You know what they say, like good teams, when they win dirty. I really thought Conroy won his battle dirty today. Not the way, he didn't kick too many long-range scores. He wasn't treading that many kick passes in. You know, it wasn't really what you'd know for Conroy every day, but I thought he was class. I thought he was brilliant now, I have to say. What is the story with Galway not having a goalkeeper for how long now? Like, how long are we looking at this shite now? In fairness, your man's a good League of Ireland keeper, Gleeson, fair play to him, all that type of stuff. But he, as you said, 3 of the goals could have been attributed to him today. 2 of them certainly were his fault. And where is a county like Galway going here? Surely there's an underage guy coming through. Surely there's some ex-player who can go back in goals or something they can do, because this is absolutely disgraceful stuff. Like Reno Niels, for their 3rd goal, Reno Niels just booted the ball up in the air. It bounced about 20 yards out from goal, and then the keeper let it come all the way into the line, broke it down, and Grugan just palmed it into the net. Like, it was shambles stuff. Like, he wasn't even under much pressure. So
you're on about me saying Galway.
but no, look, I tipped Galway. I fancy Galway. I think they're a good side. But this is terrible, absolutely terrible. How manager after manager, year after year, can look at this. It's not good enough for Division 1. It's not good enough to win a senior.
I will.
So that was a snippet of the Davy Burke and Enda Varley show. You'll get more of that at OurGame.ie. Brilliant show with the 2 lads. They've been on after every round of matches in recent times. So go and have a look at that game at OurGame.ie. Also a reminder, once more, we've said it already, live show coming up in Birr later this week, Dooley's Hotel. Contact myself, Shane Stapleton or Michael Verney to inquire about tickets. It'll be an absolutely brilliant show. Huge lineup of guests. That's it for today's show. We'll chat to you again soon.